join the ride with open hearts. Together we'll discover God's word and where it starts. Dive into the pages.
Well, welcome back to Two Faithful Brews and the Good News. I'm Paul Purefoy, and as always, I'm here with Uncle Royce, and we're your hosts, we're your brothers, we're your fellow travelers in the journey here that we've been on. And we've been discussing Genesis now for quite some time, especially Genesis chapters 1 through 3, but we're taking the questions that were in some of those episodes that we didn't get fully addressed or we missed, and we are now going back and trying to fill in the blanks in some of those questions. So before we get started into that, let's go ahead. If you like our episodes, you like the show, please go and like, subscribe, share it, hit the notification bell so that you never miss an episode. It helps us, of course, grow, but it helps us also get the good news in front of people who desperately need to hear it. So with that, now let's go ahead and get started and pour today's brew. And today's episode is guided by a question that was pulled straight out of the conversations again. And that is, are we seeing the beginning of the covenant God is preparing to make with man? And the answer that I'm going to give to it before we even start unpacking it is absolutely yes. Creation itself is covenant. It is in the seed form. Creation is the preparation for relationship. And it is also the stage that's been set on which redemption is going to later come down the line. So before we get into that and I start trying to break it down and show you, Uncle Royce, any thoughts here before I move into that?
Well, I'm going to go back and read on that question a minute, and I'm going to let it fester within my soul. It's sort of like something, you think about it, and then when it gets in there, there's something that has to come in and begin to draw that out. I mean, sometimes when things gets all festered up, it has to be drawn out. Now, that's kind of a medicinal type of looking at it, medical side of things. But when you begin talking about the things of God and the covenant and creation, and you bring those two together, there has to be a time and a period to where you stop and reflect. So what I want to do is I want to do that right now as I read that through, and I want to look at it one more time, and I'm going to read it. It said, are we seeing the beginning of the covenant of God? And I like that word beginning that's in there, because if you remember me reading in the beginning, that means that this is the very first of what we're looking at here. And we're talking about the covenant of God, and then it said with man, and then it finishes up with in these animals and provisions. When you go back and read those verses, you find that where it fits in, you're finishing with animals and moving in to that creation of man that slips into this. And that's where the creation moves into a place, and that's there. But the thing that I'm wanting to fester, that I'm saying let it fester a little bit, let me think on it, it comes back into that covenant area. Because when you look forward a little bit, we find ourselves going forward, and we'll find ourselves looking at Abraham pretty quick. If we're not careful, we'll be looking at that Abraham and the covenant God had with him. So you have to ask yourself with that word in the beginning. And with that, I'm going to stop right there. I hope I've given you something to think on here to try and move you into a place, because you said absolutely yes.
Absolutely.
And so with that being said, and we look at that, and we're talking about the covenant, we're talking about the creation, we're talking about the beginning. Which come first, the chicken or the egg?
With that, I'm going to go here.
Okay.
Genesis 1 is not a poetry that's been written. It's not just power. It is precision. And you have to look close in it, because creation will unfold fairly quickly. It is in structure, number 1. It's in order, number 2. It's in boundaries, number 3. It's in purpose, number 4. It's in blessing, number 5. It's in assignment, number 6. And then it's in presence, number 7. So every ancient covenant, whether it's been the Hittite, Mosaic, Abrahamic, it all follows the same pattern. And that is, the king introduces himself. He establishes the terms. He will define the boundaries. He will provide the blessing. He will promise the protection. He expects the obedience, and he seals the relationship. So Genesis is doing the same thing here before humanity ever even arrives. And to miss that is to miss the heart of the entire, what I would say is the heart of the entire Bible. So this is God making full outright preparation of the covenant that needs to come. Again, it's the seed that has been formed that God now has. So what comes first, the chicken or the egg? If the seed came first, what would you say, Cal, from the chicken or the egg?
Well, I'm going to go to germination now. And what I'm looking at, because when we talk about covenant, we're talking about works. When you stop and think about it, we're actually talking about works when we talk about the covenant, but it's based on a foundation. Those works is based on a foundation. That covenant is based in a foundation. That foundation is in God. That covenant is there. That foundation is there. Those works is there, but there is, and as we go through these 3 chapters, we're looking at the redemption plan. We're looking at everything that's come in. So when we talk about the covenant and the creation, this is what I'm talking about, festering up a little bit in germination. That seed, sometimes when that seed is planted and when it's placed, that's why I talk about in the beginning. And we move into that and we look at that. We get into that. And the reason I use the word germination is because we move into a place now where this covenant is a beginning spot. This is the point of contact. This is the point by which was determined. We don't know the time of the determination before we get to this place. We don't know where it was with God back in the past, where we've got and where Moses brought us is here. So what we're looking at now and what we're seeing, and we're seeing set within this, is that man now has been placed, sin has been placed, the good and evil has been placed, the moral has been placed, the redemption plan and the structure of the redemption plan in Christ has been placed. Everything is there. So we're still in that beginning, and we're at that point of contact there. Well, okay, let's go back. And this is why I said I wanted things to fester. I want to let it fester a little bit, because I think we need to look at that, because when we start drawing it out, we begin to see things that on the surface you don't see. But as it begins to draw out, you start to see that there's something there, because it's going to bring whatever's there, it's bringing it forward. That's why I wanted to go where I did. So go ahead with yours there.
So, I mean, I believe we're still in this point before the thought of man is, let me rephrase, God's probably already put his plans and purpose and thoughts into this, but before man is ever even brought to the picture, we're still at this framework. We're still in the seed portions. We're still here. And because before God can ever make Adam, and he has to build a world that's going to be able to host him.
Okay, so I want to insert a word here, intent.
Oh, yeah.
Intent.
So there was an intent
I want to insert that because I agree with what you said about man not being here, but I also agree with that seed that's there that's been planted. And that seed is Jesus Christ.
Yeah. So I think you have God here where he's creating this environment that's capable of supporting that purpose.
Yeah. So
so
we're looking forward, but we're setting the example. And we'll go back to chapter 2 and the first 4 verses of it that moves in here, and it has a place too. And we won't try to go back to those other than to mention it, because that's where God set the day of rest, and he said this is completion. There's a completion. Now we're setting it. So now go back to where you were, but I think that's what you actually was going back to when you backed up a little bit.
I think I'm still a little bit further. I'm still over in Genesis 1:1.
Even back a little further. Okay.
Because now
I can go with that.
Yeah, because again, we're back to what I said at the very beginning. There's structure, order, boundaries, purpose, blessing, assignment, and then presence. So it's got to be this full order. And the king introduced himself, and that's where Moses wrote, in the beginning, God. That was the introduction. It created, and then he established the terms.
And then we have to establish the fact that creation had not yet happened, but now Moses is writing, this is this. And actually, when he wrote that, it does bring it to here.
Absolutely.
It sets it right in the middle of it.
He establishes the terms, and now he's defining the boundaries, and then he begins to provide the blessings of the things that are going to start coming through as each day progresses. So, you end up with the very first one, the light, which was first, let there be light. It means illumination, revelation, it's clarity, it's exposure. That is something that is covenant requires. It requires revelation. And you can't walk with God if you can't see God.
And now we're getting some foundation here.
Yeah.
We're
You can't
beginning to
even
get
obey God if you can't hear God.
That's right.
So before God builds anything else, he builds the environment where there's actually going to be revelation that can reach the heart of humanity. And that is covenant language. And then you can move into the next portion of the separation now, where God divides. Genesis 1, verses 4, 6, and 7. It's light from darkness, waters above the waters from below, land from sea, because every boundary God is beginning to establish is an act of protection. It's not an act of restriction. So separation is the first step of covenant. It's holy from unholy, clean from unclean, life from death, obedience from rebellion. God's teaching creation how to respond to his word, because as we know, soon humanity will have to learn the same thing. And why couldn't we have been the other side of this thing where we just learned it and did it and didn't worry about the rest of it? But we're hard-headed and we chose the wrong path.
Well, yeah, we've done that a time or two in the past. I want to read this in Genesis 1 through 3, and it's not going to take long. And I know AI put this down, but I'm going to read it because it's to me, it's good. But it said, Genesis 1 and 3 establishes that the original creation order was a personal, relational, and moral partnership between God and humanity. Now, we're looking at covenant there when we hear that part. We're actually seeing covenant that's being set, and it's being set through who? With God. With who? With man. And when you talk about, I'm sure that I think there may be a better word than partnership we might want to use there, but still, it makes a point. It gets a point there, but it said God and between God and humanity, which although broken by sin, sets the stage. So we're looking at that seed you're talking about. It sets the stage for God's unfolding plan of redemption through subsequent covenants, ultimately fulfilled in Jesus.
Yeah. And I think the interesting portion is that this covenant that we're seeing here is going to be not just one portion. It's established for this moment, but then you're going to see the full foundational from the soul that was here through Jesus.
And
that
this is beginning to end.
Full covenant.
Yeah. And
all the way to Revelation.
Even though there's time in between the beginning and the end, when you get there with God, where God is sitting right now in this beginning, that's also where the ending is going to be, because the fullness of it is established at this moment. And now man is allowed to fulfill their part as time plays out and we go forward. So I think that's kind of what this is making a statement of. And we look at that and it puts us into a place that God is in control, but we only benefit from this. And I don't care much for that partnership word, but that relationship that we have with God, the only way we maintain that relationship in him is if we reach into him and we have that fellowship with him and we move forward in him. We cannot have that unless we have that full relationship and character of him. And it backs up, it talks about that character of being made in the image of God and what have you, and being formed in that image. And that's kind of what we're looking at here. That preparation is there. And that's what God's looking at. Man, I mean, from where we're at here, man, like you said a while ago, man ain't made it yet.
No, I mean,
but it's intended for man.
I think this is why when the question came up, we'd have to go back and listen to the full episode, but are we seeing the beginning of the covenant God is preparing to make with man?
Yeah.
Because it's before he comes into path or before humanity comes along. And again, every stage, every day is showing us something more, because we went from the light, you would go from the separation. Now we're to the gathering of the waters. Waters are a representation out of Genesis 1 and 9. It's always symbolizing chaos, judgment, cleansing, renewal, birth, even boundaries, because it's, you got the banks. But the first covenant that we get, shadows appear here.
And it's fulfilled within the relationship and the redemption plan. But we go back to that first 4 or 5 words in Genesis again, and we pick up. Faith comes in here now, because this is it. God is faithful in the fact that he's doing what he's doing and made his determination moving forward. And man has to remain faithful within the faith of God, and he has to remain faithful in that relationship in order to receive and establish on that foundation. But it becomes where it started out as a nation and as a group. Actually, with Abraham, it began with an individual, but it was established in a nation. Okay. And
Yeah.
I just wanted to look at that part of it for a minute and consider it when we look at where we are today.
Yeah, absolutely. So you get the first covenant shadows again that we see that appear here. So before you end up with Noah's flood, before you have the Red Sea, before baptism, we get again pattern. God sets the pattern. And interesting enough, he establishes a world where water becomes both discipline and deliverance, and the boundaries were still there. That is covenant. And then you have the earth begins to rise. So this is a resurrection pattern. Again, back to the very soul, all the way through to the redemption into the Jesus Christ, all the way through the book of Revelation. So this is where God calls what is hidden to now rise up. So the earth comes up from the depths, and we have creation is preaching the gospel. It's speaking the very thing that is going to come forth. So what is buried shall rise. What is unseen shall be revealed. What is dead shall be resurrected. That's only God. Only God could create that kind of a foreshadow system all the way through.
And in Ecclesiastes, Solomon said very plainly, all of these things that are there, without God, this is what it is. This is what you will have without God. There's nothing new under the sun. So anything that comes in, it's within the confines, once again, the redemption plan and foundation on the Lord.
It's resurrection again in the soul.
There you go.
It's the covenant groundwork.
I love that foundation.
I mean, because before you can have seed, you got to have the foundation. You got to have the place to put it. So that has to take you to the next portion where you have seed within itself in Genesis 1:11. And it's probably one of the most overlooked verses in the entire chapter. And it means future is already, destiny is already, provision is already, and tomorrow is already. So you have future already is embedded, destiny is already encoded, provision is already planted, and then tomorrow is already present in today. Because before mankind can ever arrive, God has already prepared a future inside itself. So its future's coming inside the seed. It will continue to prosper and grow until God establishes otherwise. Why? It is the groundwork of his covenant. So
You can't
and
get
that's
away
the
from
same
it.
true with Christ.
Can't
No.
get away from it. It's there.
And it's the promised seed, Genesis chapter 3 and 15. Covenant it starts with seed. And then everything God creates is referencing the arrival of that someone special. And again, we go back to God. What is his character? He's got patterns that is in his character all throughout. He doesn't change. Day 1 through 3 was forming. Day 4 through 6 is filling. So God forms and he fills. Then he builds structure. And then he introduces relationship. So creation is not a set of randomness. It's not coming from the ooze that was left over from the Big Bang that happened on a cosmic scale where we have a microscopic organism we can't see that's smaller than the dot on a page. Something had to happen to establish, and God said, and creations happened. So it is a relational architectural thing that's been built. So God's building this house for his family. He just hasn't introduced it yet.
And now I'm not going to go where I started to go. I'm going to back up and I'm going to hold up. I'm going to wait because that'll come in coming weeks. But the thing that I look at where you're talking about now, and you get there into this foundation, we're bad today. We're bad today about making assumptions. We look at these things and Paul, we've read them. We've been, I mean, you had one of the same grandmas I did. My mama was your grandma. Your daddy was my brother. And we come out of the same family. We come out of the same family tree. And we were raised with certain ideas and thoughts and certain things, but we received those things that our heart and mind told us was the best for us. Sadly, we make assumptions on what we believe to be best for us. And that's where we base our knowledge. And what we're seeing right here is a knowledge that man does not have the capacity to know, to understand. He has no ability of wisdom to take and grasp what is there. And he certainly is not able to make a discernment to choose and act on it. And when he does, it's coming out as assumption. And it very likely is going to be wrong. And that's where we are many times today. And then we have a price we have to pay for. So I bring that in because I look at where we are today. And it's kind of like you said when you were talking about your message and which way to go, what's there. Sometimes God will reach down to us and say, don't get in a hurry. Wait for me. Let me do the leading and guiding. And that's kind of where we're sitting today.
That kind of brings it to this next day, the 6th day portion. When God creates man on day 6, you then see where the language that's being done shifts. There's no other part of creation that gets this kind of conversation. So no other part of creation gets purpose spoken over it. There's no other part of creation that is made in the image of God. This is now this covenant identity that's being brought into. So before God ever gives humanity the responsibility, he first gives them the blessing. That again is part of his pattern, because blessing always comes before the assignment. Jesus, go back to the baptism of Jesus. What did he get? He got the blessing before he went into this assignment. So,
but you kind of got
have this covenant partner that steps into the story.
I'm kind of going to step in here just a little because we're back to that covenant creation and what's there in that seed and where we're sitting looking right here. And they're kind of building together. There's the separation that's there is, Paul, it's kind of like the Trinity when you think about it. It works from a separate direction, from a separate way, but it works instantly and in unison. There's no time gaps. There's no, hey, I'm going to do this, then you do that. God has spaced this, and man steps into that. So what you've got is the creation that's there, that's been created. But in the process of that creation, also established within that dirt and what's there is that covenant. It's there. So you don't separate them. They're together. They have not come to fruition. That seed hasn't germinated to the point that it's come to fruition yet,
Right.
But they are together. So when, and why I wanted to kind of let this fester is bring it into where I'm at now, because you can see now, this is what I wanted to be sure of in my heart and mind is that separation can create confusion. Separation can puts us into a place of choice. If we're not careful, we have a 50-50 chance in that choice of being right. We've got a 50-50 chance of being wrong. But if we let God make it, that choice that we make will be made in perfection, and it will be the right one. And with that, I'm going to hush because I feel like I think I made my point as to what's there. I think I did.
And I think we're getting pretty close to where we want to be or need to be on this. I could be wrong, but just to continue the process and the thought here of why we still say yes, that it was a covenant was coming before the man being prepared here, is you're back to earth is a covenant ground. Eden was the sanctuary. So it is the first temple. It's the first altar. It's the first meeting place. It's the first holy ground. I mean, that's where you get here. So God walks there. He speaks there. He reveals himself there. He forms the relationship there. It's the first covenant space that's been provided.
But have you moved into chapter 3 in that covenant space already and jumped the 2nd chapter? And the reason I say that, because we miss that 7th day and that day of rest that we're looking at here. Before we move into that, we got that day of rest and that day that God has said it looks good. It's all there, which he's saying now. And we're talking about that covenant creation relationship now, because we're about to move into where you're at, that place of emergence. There's going to be a merging takes place. You talk about germination and what's there. You're beginning to see that because man is about to move into that.
Yeah.
And the first products that comes from that, the first truth that's coming from that is going to be there.
Well,
But God said, I
where,
want the church to understand this creation has got to be perfect.
and I think that's where this is right now, is that this is more the day 7 portion, because this is, again, is the sanctuary.
Okay.
Okay. The day that would be a day of rest when God says it's finished. I've walked there, spoke there, revealed myself here. I've formed the relationships that I have here. And
One other thing.
And this relationship is with everything that he's put in place.
Yeah.
It is in him.
One other thing that I think we need to understand in where we at up to this point is that, number one, if you notice, there was 2 creations that took place here. You had the one that was the creation and preparation. You had the next one to where life is brought in. There's a creation and preparation. They're both together and they come together in the finality. But in looking at those, we've had 2 creations. We've got two preparations. They've come together. Now, where you're going now, we're actually moving in, and we are still in the third creation and the third preparation. So we've got the first, second, and third. And the third one is kind of like Jesus. It's the redemption plan. It ain't complete. This is where I thought these verses in chapter 2 brings us to, and that is the place that now that has been brought together, the movement forward now is with man. And this is where the covenant and the creation, now the creation has done its part. It's still there, and we're within that creation. But it's the covenant that God has with man now that moves to the front and begin, kind of like Jesus coming and taking and moving forward in Christ, moving from the law into grace. So what we're beginning to see now is that working of the covenant coming together within the creation, and what we're seeing, the preparation that was made with God coming to man.
Okay. So before I move into this next area that I was looking at, the first promise, I want you to go back because you made a statement, and I want to be sure it's clarified because.
And he may need clarification.
Yeah, because, I don't perceive it in the manner that you had it spoken it. So I want to be sure it's clarified based off of what you're talking here, that anybody listening gets the understanding from it and where it all applies. You made the statement that there are, I want to say you said 3 creations.
Well, we're working.
I know you're talking about 2.
We've got 2. The third is in process.
If you'll take the explanation, explain what the first one was, the second one, and what the third one is, just so we have it defined.
Okay, the first one's actual creation. It's going all the way back from the beginning. We go back to the first verse where it says those first 5 words, in the beginning God created. Okay, that's, for all practical purposes, that will be the creation, which is the first written creation that Moses used. The second one is when Moses brought us into a place, the preparation geographically, materially, everything that's there within the cultural movement, the geographical movement has been placed in perfection, made, for all practical purposes, it is a home God produced and made for man that was set. But you made the statement earlier about that seed that's being planted. You're looking at a second one here. This is the one where he starts talking now, and you'll find that seed is still very much there, very much germinating. It just moves from Christ and the completion of there into man. But what we do is we continue that. And when I say it's the third one, the writing now, the reason you don't see it the way it is in the first and second writings in Genesis is because it's incomplete. Man has to complete that. And until such time as that is completed, you don't have the third part completed. It's incomplete. And that's kind of what I'm looking at. And people need to understand, we're actually a part of that third part. God has brought us in now, and that creation that was there, he created us. He created us in perfection in him. We had a relationship in him in perfection. And the fall brought us, and we lost that through the fall. Now the recovery began.
Okay, so
yeah,
just make sure for clarity purposes that I'm on the same page. It's not necessarily that there's 3 separate creations. It's the fact that there's 3 parts to this creation of what God's doing.
Yeah, I thought I let in my mind.
Okay, I just wanted to make sure that was the
and that
I was understanding it.
Yeah, but that third part is we we are a part of that third part.
It's the
So it
redemption.
can't.
It is the covenant of the redemption plan from the very beginning. What we've been discussing the whole time.
And
from the very
if you
beginning.
wanted to put a finality on it, I would say that finality of the third part would have culminated at the cross when Christ hung on the cross and said, "It is finished." That would be, if we were going to. I'm not sure that completes it. That's why I step back and say, no, we've got it. It has to finish Alpha and Omega.
Yeah, you got to go all the way to Revelation, because you're going to have the beginning 144,000 that's still got to come into play. So that's not until later. So
I say it this way to get people to understand, because people are awfully dismissive of the Old Testament. They're very dismissive. And you cannot dismiss the Old Testament without dismissing God. You have to. If you dismiss God, that's why I asked that question with them first 5 words. And that's why I think they were written. Moses wanted us to understand, I'm starting where my relationship with God is and where he began with me. And I'm going back from what I've learned and understood, and I know, and I'm beginning that writing. But these 5 words says, but before this happened, this is what had to take place. There had to be a cause and a completion before he could begin the actual creation. And and that's kind of what but today we look back many times. I hear people time after time say, well, I'm not interested in the Old Testament. We're under grace.
Yeah.
And you hear that so much.
Oh, you do? Yeah, I agree.
And that's so that's why I said it the way that I did. But I'm going to tell you what it did. Probably anybody that hears it, it's going to catch them too, and they're going to stop questioning. They'll take time to question it.
Well, that's why I wanted to be sure we had clarity to it, because I didn't want there to be any confusion to what's.
And being me, I can say things in ways that cause us to want to stop and think.
It's so interesting to see what God does and how he works things.
No doubt.
So we've gotten basically through the 7 days there, and now we're to the first promise. It actually wasn't given to man. It was prepared for man. So this is where the whole episode really comes together, because it's before Adam fell, before Eve listened to the serpent, before the sin actually brought in the corruption that caused all of havoc for creation. God had already placed covenant patterns into his creation. And that means the promise of redemption didn't begin in Genesis chapter 3. It began in Genesis chapter 1. So this is where the Lamb wasn't chosen after the fall. He was chosen before the foundation of the world. Revelation chapter 13 say. And creation itself is a covenant architecture. In other words, it's the blueprint for redemption. So that's kind of where we're at. So are we seeing the beginning of the covenant? After
I'm going to go back to after what we're doing, I think it's festered to the point where I can say, yes, I do believe you're right. Now, before I was kind of on the fence. I was leaning toward, I'm not sure, but I was leaning more to the no side than the yes, because I had not brought them together. But I think we've made a point now, and we have made our point, that God understood and knew that separation can bring destruction. Unity brings victory.
Absolutely.
And I think that's when we talk about covenant and creation, we're talking about the creation, and the covenant is with man and the benefits of that creation.
Yeah, that's good. So yeah, I think without a doubt, the answer to the question is yes, because creation is got it all throughout the covenant truths. God's revealing himself. Again, he separates what will destroy man from what will bless man. He's prepared the environment for safe relationships. He has embedded a future redemption into what was present at the time. So the reality will continue to go into the future. And he formed humanity as his image and bearing partner. So covenant began before creation was complete. And that's so massive to really come to the understanding of. And again, I don't think we ever just really take the time to dig into it for the completion of understanding, because it really reveals the very more foundation portion of who God really is, that he's not, when we think we've got him figured out, there's just more to continue to go with. I don't think we could ever have a microscope that could see the small enough areas of who God is. Yeah.
That's the thing about it. The depth which is there We can't fathom it. We cannot.
So let's take it straight to the living room. If God built creation with covenant in mind, then he built who in mind?
He built it with man in mind.
He built it with us in mind. So that means we're not afterthoughts. We're not an improvisation where we were improvised.
Actually, pre-creation.
Yeah. We weren't even thrown together in a hurry. Some of us, we look like we have been. We act like we have been. We act like we're not fully well done or seasoned, but we weren't thrown together in a hurry. So he prepared the environments before he prepared us. So that means he made room for your calling. And I have news for us. Our calling is not based off of what we desire. Calling's based off of what his desire is. He will equip us for the call that he places on us.
Question. Right there. When you make that statement, it's not ours. The only way that we can have the relationship with him is if he is on the throne. So what separates us from that? The fall and the sin. And in order to be in that covenant with him, we have to put him back on that throne. How do we get him there in our individual lives? How do we get him there? There has to be a recognition and understanding of who and what we are in comparison to him. And then there has to be an admission of where we are and who we are, of what that is in our lives, and a repentance. And that's when faith takes a hold. When that faith takes a hold and we begin to believe, then that repentance will turn into action. And when we turn it into action, we show that faith is alive. Was it James that said, show me your faith by your works and I'll show you your works by your faith? That's about as clear as you can get when it comes to the relationship and this covenant we've got. That's exactly what we're looking at.
It's not about programs and all of the different things that are placed in churches anymore. It's just programs that man has come up with.
Yeah.
The actual call that God places on someone, he will equip them for that to be completed. And sometimes it will be the introvert doing an extrovert thing, or vice versa. An extrovert has to do an introvert thing. He will shift our roles to be able to accomplish what he needs us to accomplish, because it's his will that gets done, not ours.
Unification will come from separation. Separation will move us into a place, but it has to be placed on a foundation. That foundation has to be in unity. That unity has to be in God, in the Trinity. That unity has to be in the cross, because that's where grace and the redemption plan was fulfilled. So you cannot separate in order to get unity. You have to be separate and repent in order to come into unity on the foundation. We cannot have unity in ourselves. We can be separate in who we are in our character, but the unity comes from God. We can be as different as we want to be, but we still have to look to God, and the call of where we are and what we are has to come through the leading of the Spirit, and that Spirit's going to be based on the truth of the Word, and that will be morality fulfilled, and the rule of law will have it. The 10 Commandments will be automatic, and he said, I'll place it in your heart and give you a heart of flesh. And that's where it comes from right there. But we have to be the catalyst. He is the foundation, but the catalyst of what's there, we have to generate. We cannot do it within ourselves. We have to know where we're going and what we're going, and we've got to go in faith. We may not even understand it, but if we have a foundation of faith and we respond to that, then he said, you will by nature do those things that are pleasing to me. That's a pretty strong statement.
Yeah. So he makes room for our calling.
There you go.
He prepares a provision for our journey. He aligns our gifts with our assignment. He secures our redemption before we ever needed it. And he made covenant before we could ever make a mistake. Covenant's not something that God gives after failure. It's something that's built before failure ever exists. Who else can?
Preparation.
So as we close this episode, creation is not only the beginning of the world, it is actually the beginning of relationship. Creation is covenant in seed form, and redemption is the blueprint form. And then we have grace in the architectural form. With that, until next time, again, if you like the episodes, you like what we do, please share it, like, share, subscribe, hit the notification button with YouTube. You can also go to our Facebook page, Two Faithful Brews and Good News, and follow us on there as well. So until next time, stay rooted, stay faithful, stay in the Word, and all the best, and God bless.